So we're talking about boundaries, and real quick, I punched in the Google, like, what are some examples of, setting boundaries, Google. Do you have any idea what the first AI response was?
I don't actually. There's no whiplash
Google's
kind of knee-jerk reaction.
Google's first AI response was, "I won't have sex without a condom." Bang.
No way.
100%.
No
I copy pasted
way.
it. Number one was, "I don't want to have sex without a condom," followed by, "Please ask before you use my laptop." And lucky third was, "Please don't talk to me while I'm in the bathroom." So there you go, Misfits. Right off the rip. 3 examples from Google's AI of healthy boundary setting. Roll those credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, 2 misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits.
No way. You're messing with me.
No, Broedy, that's why I wrote it down. That's why I wrote it down. That's why I wrote it down. Like, it's not a bit. Like, I couldn't make that up. Why would I? Ridiculous. Okay, credits. You'll probably leave this in too. I know you.
I might. Yeah, I might.
All right, I'll take that hit. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
From Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Chris.
And we are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And we're here at episode 66, Misfits. 66, there's something about that. Thanks for being here. We're discussing boundaries. We're discussing setting boundaries, having boundaries, do you push boundaries, all that sort of stuff. We've just come out of the holiday period, so we've probably tolerated more family than we need to, so let's discuss it. Before we get into it, B, how did you find the interval? How did you find episode 65 in the interval?
I love the intervals. I tell you that every time. So I get excited for like the clickbait moments during there.
Yeah.
Just being clowns or something like real too. You know what I mean? Like there was a couple moments in this last episode where it was like it just from you and I felt a little more and that's I don't know the right word because I don't want to use genuine. I always feel like I'm approaching. No, genuine. Not even that. Like, right? Like, but it was just, there were a couple really real moments where some of the things that we said were just honest as fuck, So I was like, I'm for it. I like learning those episodes.
Learning new things about each other.
Yeah.
And thanks to IGU, who is the sponsor of season 6. Shout out to Nick and the app IGU, which is an old game with a new twist where modern innovation and nostalgia come together to bring you Tag for Today. You can download IGU on the Google Play Store, on the Apple Store, all the stores. Brody's running that shit. So
I'm going to
download his app.
One of these sound bits for an ad on IGU.
And you can pay me, bitch.
Fair.
That's how it is. All right, so Misfits, let's get into it. Boundaries. It seems like a innocuous topic for a podcast, but I think we've all been in relationships or positions where we haven't set clear boundaries, and it's basically come to fuck us over. Or people have you can see your friends or family around you not set clear boundaries or expectations with other people, either personally in relationships or professionally at work. Like, how many times have you stayed back, after 5 on a Friday because you feel like you gotta, because it's the right thing to do and that's what it's expected. You know what I mean? So right. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. B, I know we had this little chat just before we were setting up this episode, but how are you with boundaries? Like, do you think you set strong boundaries and you're good at maintaining them? Oh, and can you give us an example? Can you give the Misfits an example of a time when you did or didn't?
Okay. Yeah. So if we're going to generalize, I think I'd like to think I'm good at setting boundaries. I believe that stems from having children.
Makes
Truly,
sense. Makes
truly,
sense.
because I don't think it was until I really got actively aware in parenting that I even understood what that meant, you know? And it's kind of funny that the first example is that I won't have sex without a condom, because I mean, like that is
Says
one
Broedy
of
with 5 kids. Yeah, go on.
see, that's one of those things that you're like, oh shit, okay, that is such a simple statement, but it is such a strong boundary. It's just
It is a clear upfront expectation. Yes.
fucking perfectly clear, right? And I I I'd say again, a lot of this stems from kids. So if I had to give an example, I'd say even just simple rules at home, right? You know, like no shoes on the carpet, no eating in your bedrooms. We've got a bedtime, those kind of things. Where it's like if I didn't draw my line in the sand, oh, I'd be fucking walked over. I mean, I love my kids to death, but that's what kids do. Is that their whole existence is about pushing
Is testing
boundaries.
this well, it becomes a two-part thing then. Like, so setting boundaries is kind of the easy thing, like saying this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it is the easy thing. It's enforcing them, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, fuck, each kid's different. I mean, and
Right.
it's funny too, because I'm sure we'll get into that, because like that's at the basis of every relationship, right? Every relationship is different. You know, I'd approach things with you and I differently than I would approach things with Corbin and my gym time, or
Yeah.
you know, with me and Tiff. Like that's just how that ends up working out. So
So what do you do when
kid,
what do you do when other people like sleep in and are like an hour late for a podcast? What do you do there?
oh,
Hypothetically.
I knew at some point in the episode this was coming up. This was coming up. I'd probably flip my laptop and then just go to bed. That'd be me.
Moving on. That's my one jab. That's my one cheap jab.
You deserve it. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So relationships, kids. I think it's just it's individual to each person. Now, does that mean that some people get away with things more than the others? I don't like to think so when you are good at setting boundaries. Like my kids really do know, you know, like even though I deal with them different, like each of them knows. They know. And I'll say this. One of the most effective things with boundaries, and I guess, God, I sound like such a fucking douche. Like one of the things about enforcing them is that people have got to know what is on the other side of that, though, too. You know, like whether that's
Like a
an
consequence, do you
explanation,
mean?
right, and whether
Right.
that's an explanation or a real time example of like, hey, you know, I don't fuck around, and like let's say for the episode, you know, like had it been something where you've got something time related after and you're just like, fuck it, Broedy, fuck off, you know, like that in that context and that response in that situation is valid, you know, like there's levels to each of our boundaries, I think, too, and the enforcement of, you know, but again, I don't think my kids would give two fucking rips if I said don't do something, if they didn't know on the other side of that there's a very stern, angry, upset, disappointed dad that will have words with you and maybe talk way too fucking long about something that you should have just done in the first place.
Yeah.
So they know it, you know, and they won't, most of the time they won't go there. So you know, real-time examples are just those little things where it's like, hey, you know, we wake up in the morning, we take our vitamins, we have something that's not loaded with sugar. Like these are boundaries that I have that I know for a fact these guys will, you know, they won't cross because they know what it means to me as well. What about you? Because I mean, it's so much different, right? Because like it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, I can enforce shit with my kids. What's it like in a situation where you've got what was it you said, like 25, 50 guys on a speed dating thing, and fucking you're elbow to elbow, and I mean, what does that look like? Give us an example of
How are those two things related?
Come on, let's go.
Stan! Oh, just run me over with any bus you can find, bro. It's
Yes,
fine. We can talk about speed dating.
It was for the jab, bro.
That's all right. It's fair. All right, Misfits. We can talk about speed dating another time. Like, jump in the comments if you really want to know. But no. Again, we did have a quick chat about, like, are you good at setting boundaries? And I had to think on it. I'm like, I don't know. And it's in a lot of respects, I can point to things and say yes, like, definitely. Like, this is I think I'm fairly well respected by my friends and the people I associate with, so they respect my boundaries, and equally it's fairly clear expectations of who I am. I'm not specifically dating anyone, like, consistently at the moment, so that sort of discussion hasn't really come up. Obviously I don't have kids.
Well, do you think you're not okay? The reason that I kind of brought up speed dating, and this is this is where it is valid, is like, so just like you said, in that context, like, then to me it would feel like you are good at setting appropriate boundaries, and or the polar opposite, like you said, where it's like, is that why you're not dating? Because I don't know how to set boundaries. But see, like, to me, again, that's not what would happen. Like, the ulterior of not setting boundaries within that premise is generally dating too much, or dating someone you don't like,
or you just take everyone.
Right. Right. And I do not get the sense that that's what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I hope not either. The other 2 cents worth from Google's AI was, boundaries normally suffer from two things. They're either too rigid or they're too porous. So it's either, it's a blank slate and there's no room for movement, which, it's not a one size fits all, like you've just described with kids, right? Different ages, different interests, different personalities. Like, there's different sort of guidelines and expectations of each. Likewise, if you kind of say, oh, we're not going to do this, and then someone goes, oh, but really I want to, oh, okay. If you buckle every single time, and reflecting a little bit, I can see, I don't know, my mum is probably a little bit like that. It's like, mum,
oh my God,
like,
my kids would steamroll me.
Right. My old man was definitely the authoritarian, but mum, like, we respected, but we also knew, we would try it on with both of them. Like, we would try. There's different ways to work around it.
Oh, I wouldn't I wouldn't go there with Dad. Well, okay.
Interesting.
You're right. No, you're right. Go ahead. Keep going.
No, but and anyway, but we're talking about me. And so I'll give you an example of how and why I'm not quite sure. And Misfits, you can chime in because it's one of those moral gray areas. Broedy knows. Let's say I've got a friend. She's a girlfriend. Let's call her Tammy for the sake of it, right? So Tammy and I have been friends for about 4 or 5 years. Tammy's also the sort of girl that when she has a man in her life, I'm the closest friend she has. She really values and respects my friendship. Brody's laughing because he already knows who it is. She really values and respects my friendship. You know what I mean? We're so close. She can share anything with me. And that's true. That's true on a certain level. And she's shared some fairly deep things with me. When Tammy doesn't have a man in her life, oh, hey, Chris, like, we're both adults and we have needs. So here's an example of someone maybe having 2 different standards of boundaries around what's acceptable with platonic friends, or, like, are we casual fuck buddies? But it's up to her to decide when this is going to be. Now, I've always sort of made it clear that, like, no, like, here's the friend line. The friend line's good, and, like, all the best with that, But we'll track back to the New Year's just passed. So the reason I mention this is New Year's was coming up. I didn't really have any plans, and neither did Tammy. She was all alone and, like, blah, blah, blah. And she messaged me and said, oh, well, hey, what are you doing? And I told her not much. And she's like, oh, me neither. I'm kind of lonely, blah, blah, blah. And I knew, I could feel, like, the hook had been baited, and I'm supposed to bite back and go, oh, well, and I didn't. I respected the boundary. Or whatever. But then Tammy's messaged me the next day and said, well, what if I just came down to yours and you could cook dinner and we could go see the fireworks and then we could chill on the rooftop, like all for New Year's Eve. And I knew that where this was going because Tammy doesn't really have a man in her life right now.
We all know where this is going. Dinner and rooftop fireworks.
On New Year's Eve when you sort of invite yourself down. Right. So
on the one day that you're almost conscripted to fucking kiss somebody, like eat an ass, Tammy. You know exactly what you're doing.
Okay. So Chris set a boundary. Chris set a boundary and Chris literally said, listen, the both of us, like one-on-one on New Year's, I don't think is a good idea. And I took the hit on this one. Said, look, I don't think I'd behave appropriately. So, look, if something else comes up, I'll let you know, or if things change, like I'll let you know. So I kind of left it open there, so it wasn't just a flat out rejection. But I'm just flagging this now, like this is not what it's going to be, right? I got sort of a snippy response of like, oh, fine, that wasn't what I was saying, you know, like backtrack, and I just needed a friend and all this sort of thing. Okay. The following day comes like the A4 text from like, I just needed a friend and I'm really alone. I'm going through a hard time and I can't believe, like, there's certain men who I considered friends who I've been close to who think they can take advantage of me. And like, maybe it's me and my relationships with men and all this sort of shit, basically. So that's what it was, Misfits. It was one of these things where here's an example. Okay, what would you do, basically? What would you do if this was sort of the dynamic in the relationship that you had with someone of the opposite sex or even the same sex that you might be interested in, whatever, and then they invite themselves to New Year's and you sort of set your fence, your boundary, and you say, no thanks, right? And even when they get all snippy, you don't backtrack and go, oh, okay, no, let's do it. I was still like, no, okay, thanks. Let's. The end result, of course, was her having got an essay worth of text of like, oh, she just needs to break to sort herself out. And I think I replied in like one sentence. I'm like, thanks. I think I need some space too. Like, all the best. And that was
beautiful.
That was that. And she still wants to be friends and like reach out anytime if you need someone. I think I need to do some soul searching. I'm like, okay, you probably do. But here's like, it's a sort of a classic example of like someone either
ping real quick. That's also why I'm saying good on you, because I think it takes a lot of awareness to give someone that space, right? Because I think when we get approached in someone's, how do I want to say that? You know, like knee-jerk reaction to our boundary. It's like you said, a lot of the times people will go, oh shit, I didn't know that would make you feel that way. And then they kind of compromise on their boundary because of someone's reaction or perception of that boundary. And it's like, bro, you don't, what? No, we're all fucking adults. You said something and you felt a certain way. Why do you have to explain that at all?
There's a whole, we'll dive into that, I'm sure, you know, because if it was just as easy as set your boundary and walk away and everyone will respect it, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? But yeah, so that was, here's an example of, I think I'm fairly consistent with someone, you know, and I've made it clear, and there's been advances previously where I've been like, no thanks, like, no, you're going home. And here was another instance.
So then what triggered ultimately you saying that you don't feel you are good? Because the more we get into this explanation of it, I feel like you are. You've got a sound vision of what that boundary is for you. You're willing to communicate it, and you're willing to take the backlash of somebody not... Because to me, look, I'll say this, Tammy, I love you to death, but that just seems like you're disrespecting someone's boundary, or in a way you're emotionally not seeing it for what it is, you know what I mean? And then you take it upon yourself to it inflicts me in some way, right? Your boundary has now left me alone. Your boundary has now made me feel like I can't come to you as a friend. Get the fuck out of here. No, this should make you feel more secure in the fact that, hey, this is where I'm at, and you get to know 100% all the time. And the ground that you stand on isn't some shaky fucking shit that you're not even sure of.
Right.
Sorry.
And, I mean, I'll also flag just for fun that if the roles were reversed, I would be
100%.
the creepy, sleazy motherfucker on a New
100%.
Year's, like angling for like a little something. Anyway, look, thank you. It's a nice compliment. The reason I say I don't know is because for 90% of my time, I'm single on my own. So it seems like my boundaries are easy to set and easy to maintain. But an example of where like it might not be so true is Christmas. Because this year I'm in Sydney, like we're all going to Melbourne for Christmas, and I love my family, but I fucking hate the farm, and right, and so it's pay for a plane, right? So paying for a plane ticket, pay for a plane ticket, go down to Melbourne for a couple of days, and even then, my brother didn't show up until like after Christmas. So this whole thing, so it was functional, and I know this, and I knew this going, and if I'm dead fucking honest, the only reason I go is guilt. And it's my mother's guilt because she doesn't have her right. She doesn't have her parents.
Does she make you feel guilty, or
no.
do you feel guilty? Like
if I was cynical, I'd say both. But look, I'm taking responsibility for me. Okay. So that's that. So she'll leave it open like a good little Catholic schoolgirl and go, look, Christmas is down in Melbourne this year. And we've I do. Right. Yeah. So, and she's already had the chat with me at a similar Christmas down in Melbourne where like, you're all they've got because her parents aren't alive.
Right.
And it's just her sister and her kids. And you're like, so that's now burned on my soul.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to say the same motherfucking thing to my kids when my dad is gone. So like, I'm sorry. Like, I get it. I get it.
Right. So if I was to my core honest, I would go, I could give or take Christmas one with my family. I love them, but honestly, and I could not give a fuck about going to Melbourne. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best Christmases I ever had was when I could I think I was down in Melbourne for the actual day and then was on a flight to Bali Boxing Day. And and even then there was a little bit of guilt, but I'm like, fuck it. I've had a rough year. I'm doing the fuck what I want to do, and I'm going to Bali. Fuck it. And I was out. Spent New Year's in Bali. So that's an example. There's times when there's expectations of the family, and if it was anyone else, I'd go, thanks for the offer, but no thanks, and just sort of have that. But
right,
we become emotionally flexible with our boundaries and our conditions with certain people in certain contexts. See.
Yeah, I mean,
and look, if I'm being honest, and if we, fuck, I'm here now. If we really want to pull back the curtain a little bit, there's certain girls at certain times that I hook up with because I'm bored, and that's not great boundary settings on my part. You know what I mean?
Is or isn't it though? Because the same thing that we're talking about, I think this applies, and I know it's such a.
Tammy's not one of them.
And it's such a bullshit thing that it's like, does this apply to this, and that? If it doesn't, like, then fucking trash it. Who cares? Kind of thing. Right. Like, that's not necessarily what I'm saying, though. But like, again, same thing for you. I don't necessarily look at it that way. I was just having this conversation with someone in the sauna the other day. Right, 50. Hear me out. Hear me out.
I am. But it's every 50, time you. It's. Yep, go on. Go shoot.
50-year-old dude, we're just sitting in the sauna, we're having a conversation. Almost kind of the same thing. He's talking about the sauna though. He's talking about how inconsistent he is. It doesn't it's hard for him. It's just something that and I said, look, I mean, it's just a boundary. It's just something that you have to definitively say to yourself that, hey, I'm going to be here for 15 minutes, whether it sucks or not. And that it is what it is. That is it. It makes it so much easier. I told him that. I was like, dude, I tell myself today's 20 minutes. That's what it's going to be. I'm not arguing with myself. I know it's going to suck, but it's 20 minutes. It's 20 fucking minutes. That's it. Now, same thing for you where, like, again, it's kind of weird, weird reference. I know,
right.
But
draw the parallel. Yeah.
But where you're sitting here and you're saying, okay, I'm bored. I'm going to entertain this. to me, you've just established that that's a boundary that you have, that when you get bored, these are certain people and things that I'm willing to entertain in those moments. That's not a bad thing if you have control of it in that moment. That's what I'm saying. Well, if you have control where you say, okay, I know and I am fully aware I'm bored as fuck. This is what I'm going to do to fix it. This is what I'm going to do to fix it. Because there are ulteriors too, where I've the same thing with the dude in the sauna. You don't hit the sauna, bro. You're 50 years old. We live in the U.S. You're probably filled with fucking toxins. That shit'll kill you. You don't have an option. You need to do something. And if the sauna is what you're going to do, you cannot waver on that. Same thing. Boredom. Okay. I could go out and self-destruct. I could choose to drink for the first time. I could choose to do this for the first time. I could be in a really bad promiscuous situation that's not somebody I'm comfortable with. I could do all blah, 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 you know, and your boundary is that, fuck, okay, I'm getting bored. There's a fucking whole side of fucking shit that I could fall down, but instead I'm going to entertain somebody that I know is safe, that I know is you know, something that I'm familiar with, that I know that I have control in the situation. That to me is not, again, I guess what I'm saying here ultimately, and same thing for the guy in the sauna, is I wish people gave themselves a little more control. Like, you are the one in control of that, and that can be its own established boundary.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. I hear. Misfits, let us know what you think.
Sorry for the weird analogy, but
I get it. There's like discipline and boundaries go hand in hand. You know what I mean? Because the best way to avoid,
and that's your discipline, is that I'll entertain those relationships instead of fucking going down and spending a fucking million whatever at the fucking brothel or however the fuck. Bro, there's people that would though. There's people that would though.
It's an industry for a reason, right?
Fuck right. Talk about fucking boundaries.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I guess it comes down to I forgot what I was going to say, but that, like, discipline and boundaries do go hand in hand, and I suppose in Tammy's case, it comes down to consistency. Like, it's fine. The boundary that you have on Monday, ideally you still have the same boundary on Tuesday and for the rest of the week. You know what I mean? It's parenting 101, that if chocolate is not okay on a Monday, then all of a sudden it is okay on a Tuesday, maybe on a Wednesday, but only at dad's place on a Thursday. And like, the fuck, like, it's impossible to navigate. And more practically, for in relationships, work or professional, people don't know what to expect from you. And
I'd say that a lot of the times that just presents anxiety on their side of the relationship. And I'm talking even from a parental standpoint. Like, I know that my kids, when they don't know what the fuck is up, they're in a weird spot, because again, and look, this is that same kind of thing where it's like, even if someone knows the consequence of a broken boundary, they don't know the boundary. What fucking clarity do you give that human being? Oh my God. They're just sitting in a fucking trap. They're waiting for something to happen. They're on eggshells. They're on fucking broken glass. Like, that's a shitty thing to do to people. You know what I mean? Where it's like, is opposed to, like you said, hey, no, chocolate before you fucking eat something normal is not cool. Ever. Fucking ever. That's it.
I always have a pretty solid analogy for relationships, even, and friendships and things. But it was like, you can the playground can be as big and small as you want it, so long as you have strong, clear fences. Like, so long as people know where the fences are. You know, people will, in life, in communities and things, people will generally regulate themselves. Like, if you know where the fences are and that's enforced and that's respected, you generally don't have a lot of problems. It's kids in a playground. That was sort of my approach on most things. You know what I mean? And that's normally how I approach relationships as well. Like, if we're together and you want to be with me and I want to be with you, cool, that's established. And, you know, here's the foundational rules of trust and communication and shit. But I'm good with the rest. Like, you don't have to like all the things that I like, and you can have your own interests and career, and you're allowed to have your own friends. You know, But
Right.
you know, are we cool with that? You know, and
Yeah.
it's interesting that a lot of people. It's interesting. I've stumbled onto 2 or 3 sort of friends and casual acquaintances later who it's a very different reality for them. But that's something else entirely. But let's change gears for a minute, because if we're talking about setting boundaries and respecting them, that's one half of this conversation. The other half of the conversation, Broedy, is do you push boundaries? Have you been known?
Oh, good.
Have you been known in your time to push the occasional boundary?
I mean, yes. And I mean, tonight's a good example of it. I mean, look, when it's so funny too, because I don't mean to sound like pompous or arrogant, but like I think a lot of people in my situation, given not having done or trying to do as much as I am doing, would be like, whoa, bro, this kid's a fucking nut. This kid's a fucking nut. Again, I'm a father of 5 misfits, and I love all my kids, but that's a lot in its own thing. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. I run this podcast with Chris. Oh my God. I run this podcast with Chris. I run marketing for an app that's looking at millions in funding and has reached 25 plus million, blah, blah, blah. I have a lot on my plate. I also try to build a business for my grandmother. I've got my own social media that's, you know, budding and doing its thing, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff to where it's like you stack enough plates and generally they're going to fall over. But I'm the type of kid that says, how many fucking plates can I actually stack and continue to move forward? And I've found that, man, I'm really uncomfortable when I don't have a lot of plates. When I am free and clear, that's when I'm the most uncomfortable. So for me, boundaries and pushing them are where I find a sense of purpose, right? Like, and I do think it is like that for a lot of people without necessarily the awareness behind it, because I see a lot of dads that do the same thing. Like, I mean, even just from work to home life, I'm like, bro, you don't have to come work out with me, bro. You don't have to fucking try to do this. You don't have, because I know, you know, I know what that's like. I know that there can be a night when you've spent all week working on a pitch deck for funding and having conversations and talking to your kids and going to the gym, and you almost miss your recording and you're like, oh shit, you know, like, is this when I fucking draw a line in the sand and say I'm fucking burnt? Or you get up and you keep going, you know, like that's me. I would like to think that 9 times out of 10 I'm going to get up and keep going, and that's the boundary per se that I push almost consistently in my life. So yes, in certain contexts, but if we're talking about personal boundaries, like in me being the opposition, I don't like doing, especially if I know your boundary, whether that's something in the relationship, whether that's something in the friendship, same thing, whether you have like eating preference or dietary things. Like, I like to be the guy that knows you for that and respects it, you know, because again, to me, that's such an acknowledgement and an awareness of that person and the way that they're operating, that when it's done for me, oh my God, I'm just, thank you. You know, like, I appreciate you. I know you see me. I know you're making an effort. That means something to me. That fucking means something to me. So, you know, again, when confronting others' boundaries, I try to be as respectful as possible. Same thing for tonight. You know, I jump on the chat and I'll tell you, no, I'm sorry. Hey, shit, this is what it was. And I'll be honest with you every single time. I never try to lie or anything like that. If it's simply me and I miss my fucking alarm, I'll tell you, fuck, dude, out of respect for you, that was my fault. I apologize, you know, and yeah, that's the best you can do in my head, you know, but I think there's a lot of people on both sides of that I talked about that don't even have the awareness piece of it. And I think that's the biggest thing that's frustrating, or I guess disappointing, in like kind of adult relationships, where it's like, bro, we're not 20 anymore. You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of crazy that this is something that I would have to explain. So for instance, I won't detour too far from the original point, but I do want to say this. There was something that came up the other day where I was in the chat with the boys, and we were having a conversation. They made a statement about something that they would rather do, and I said, hey, look, I'm not interested. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. This is what it is for me. And you'll get a little bit of pushback generally when it's more than one of the dudes, you know. But no, once they started push back, I very definitively said, hey, I'm not doing it. You guys are totally fucking open to do it. I'll go do my own thing for the time being. We'll link back up. I'm cool. I'm totally cool. They were all okay with that. They were all okay with that. They said, okay, fucking meet us in 15 minutes and we'll do what you're hoping to do. You know, like fucking we'll go knock this out real quick and blah, blah, blah. And again, I want to cycle back just for a second to where it's like, if we didn't have clear insight onto our own boundaries, we wouldn't be able to identify boundaries in others.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that that's one thing that I'd like to say in this kind of piece of it all, is that I don't want to give myself like the pat on the back, but it just does take that awareness of self to even realize that somebody might have some certain boundaries around a fucking situation or a relationship, you know, and then take that extra step to respect it. Respect it. Fucking respect it. Please. My God. It does wonders. It does wonders. The acknowledgement and the respect. Yeah, it does wonders. So for you, I mean, I outside of the normal premise of setting boundaries and acknowledging boundaries, how do you feel it sits with you on those sides of the spectrum, whether it's a pushing the boundary for yourself and or pushing someone's boundary? What is that like for you? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, look, similar to you, like, undoubtedly, personally and professionally, undoubtedly, I push my own boundaries. Like, that's sort of a given.
Yes, you do. Yes,
and sort of being a creative in nature and writing the books that I write and all that sort of stuff. It's also you start challenging industries and entire ways of thinking. So pushing their boundaries of like, this is established thought. And it's like, well, it's wrong. I can prove it's wrong. Do you want to listen? You know, and so having that discussion, that's one thing, I think. But more specifically in terms of respecting other people's, I would like to think that I do. If I've got a fairly diverse group of friends, anytime something's been flagged, like, this isn't cool, I don't want to do that, or, you know, I don't want to eat this or go here, or this is how I feel about things, cool, that's just accepted. You know what I mean? There is something, I do have a tendency, and I do this with people I have a bit of familiarity with, is I'll ask why, because not out of challenge, but if I can understand why this fence is here, then I better understand you. And that just rather than it just being like an arbitrary rule of don't do this, don't say this, don't go here. It's like, okay, but just, can you explain why? Can you please give me some context? Because I respect you, and because I respect you, I'd like to understand you. You know what I mean? So and it's delicate sometimes. It's the same sort of conversation when people ask me like, "Oh, why don't you drink?" You know, well,
because it can feel like a challenge. Because it can feel like a challenge.
Yeah, and you have to justify something personally, you know. And it's like, well, is it religious? Like, was your parents an alcoholic? Did you?
But how funny is that? How funny is that you ask me why it's there, and I all of a sudden have an issue.
Oh, it's sort of hilarious because it's I've dealt with it my whole life, obviously, but it's consistent, and those are the big three. Like, is it religious? Did you have a bad experience once? Were your parents alcoholics? And those are the top three, and the answer to all three is no, and it's just simply not my jam. And it takes a bit for them to compute, and like never, not on the 21st, not in a wedding. Like, will you ever drink? And again, the honest answer is to that is I don't know, but right now, I'm cool without it. You know, and now to follow up from that, as far as I'm aware, everybody that I've spoken to and every friend that I has respected that.
Yes.
That's
Right.
that. You know what I mean? There's always been, you know, a cheeky friend once or there, or like a cheeky girlfriend every now and then. It's like, you sure you don't want a little something with me? Like over dinner?
I mean, I'd ask you. I mean, I don't drink anymore, but like if we were out, of course, I'd try to.
Don't worry, I promised my first drink to about a dozen different people. So, you know, but then then
we're gonna get 12 comments on this video. Hey,
right.
Where is that?
Hey, like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back to London? Yeah. I'll put a pin in that. I'll come back to it. But then the real simple question I ask, and this sort of unstitches everyone's ego around it, is like, do you want me to drink for me, or do you want me to drink for you? And then they realize it's immediately about them.
100%. And you can't. It's hard to continue down that path when someone's making you acknowledge that.
Right, and don't think that I'm not aware of it. And so this is probably a deeper discussion on boundaries, misfits. Is of like, if you said it and you feel like you've said it clearly, and if people are stepping over them habitually or pushing them or trying to get around them, it suggests that there's something else, there's some other motive kind of going on there. Now, have I ever done that personally? Yes. And I'm not fucking proud of it. I'm not at all. And it
feels like you might have a pretty distinct example. Are you willing to share?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because I'm not.
Then don't push it. We're here in boundaries. I'm going to respect it.
Thanks. And it's also something because it's not at all something that I'm proud of. And it was a conscious decision to make the worst choice. It was a breakup. It was a breakup with a girl, and she's like, cool, like here's my boundaries. I don't want to see you. Don't fucking whatever like this. And she had a massive attitude about it, but still, I was presented. Distinctly, I was presented with two doors. It's like, I can go through the moral fucking door, take the hit, like take the ego hit, like you lose, Chris, like you lose, like take the L, take the door on the left, sulk for a bit, be heartbroken, and fucking walk off. But I've always done that. I've always done like the right thing, or I can choose the door on the right and see what the fuck happens.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this dilemma and it not be the standard. It felt so good.
No, because immediately
it's mildly refreshing to hear someone say, "Yeah, that was fucking icky." Like, I do normally do the right thing. I went through that door and it fucking sucked.
And regretted it.
Would you say that's because you compromised on a moral boundary you had internally?
That's definitely part of it. And yeah, it was definitely part of it. I'm not going to give myself any excuses because it was fucked. It was fucked, and I'm completely responsible, and I shouldn't have done it. And I felt like shit, and I deserved to. And then it lasted for all of like an hour. Like, I fucking stamped my foot and was that guy for like an hour. And then after that, I'm like, no, fuck, and just sort of cut all contact. And
he
that
jumped
was
over the line and said, "Fuck this."
Yeah, tried it. It didn't work. And to her credit, like, she didn't buckle. She's like, "No, I'm fucking serious." You know what I mean? And it was like nothing violent or untoward. It was just it was all in fucking messaging. Impression. Anyway,
yeah, right.
But yeah, it was so, and that was a clear example of where someone had set a boundary, and I had deliberately gone, "Well, fuck you," and not proud of it. So I don't think there's been. I don't think there's been other circumstances previous, and I don't think there's been others. There's definitely not been since.
You had flagged something that you wanted to come back to. With London. Yeah, what was that?
My boy Graham. Check this. And this is sort of random, but it's because talking about drinking sort of came up. Like, okay, so we have to rewind 17 years, folks, when I'm living in London, like 2005 to 2007. And out of the day, 2 or 3 days before Christmas, I get a message on WhatsApp saying, Christopher Sellers, how are you? It's Graham. I'm in Sydney. I'm like, the fuck? You know, and I haven't seen... Graham is South African who studied in New York and we met in London. So he's amazing. I love him to death. He's the most eccentric motherfucker in the world.
I was about to say, sounds cultured as fuck.
Dude, but it's hilarious. He's so eccentric and he's so eccentric. But I've got a million stories, but I'm trying to stay on point. The short story is we haven't seen each other in 17 years since London. And then I met him at King's Cross Station. It was like we saw each other last week. We walk down the road. I buy him a scotch and we have a drink and everything and sit down and do that. And then we go for Thai across the road and we're catching up on everything, right? And it literally feels like it was last week. But even then, Graham, who I knew in London, and he's like, and you still don't drink? I'm like, no. And he's like, never. Because you didn't drink in London? I don't think I drank in London. No, I didn't. G. And he's like,
I mean, I would ask every time too, dude. 17 years, you know I'm asking you, bro. Dude, you haven't had a single one. Fuck off, dude. You're lying.
And it was hilarious. So he's off like touring the country at the moment, and then when he comes back into Sydney, we'll catch up with dinner again before he goes home. But that was hilarious. That the things that he remembered then, and that was one of them. But that's good shit.
Hey, just clear boundary. People remember.
Clear, consistent, clear boundary. And I've seem to have decent friends that have always respected it. Never had my drink spiked. No one ever turned into a dick. I think the worst comment I ever heard from was some dude bro at a party who said, "Oh man, I can't trust you. If you don't drink, I can't trust you." I'm like, I'm okay with that.
I can't trust you if you need me to drink to be trusted. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. And I think it's funny that's the stance that you have, because I had a ton of friends. So here in the States, and I don't know in Australia. I mean, tell me if I just sound like a fucking ignorant piece of shit. But smoking weed here is really the norm. You know what I mean? Even if it's behind closed doors or closets, like. Right. Everybody fucking does it. So when we were growing up as kids, that was one of the taboo things. Can you get a bag? Can you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I had a couple friends that just wouldn't, bro. Would not. Like, hell no, not going there. Absolutely not. They saw that Dare commercial I was telling you about.
So it's a gateway. It's a gateway to the drugs.
I'm not going to be the deflated girl on the couch.
But I would pick, you know what I mean, and poke, and you sure, dude, you sure, be that guy. But same thing where it was like when it was clear and it was insinuated and it was consistent. There were times when those friends would be, kind of same thing where it'd be like, I wouldn't say pressured or, you know what I mean, coerced, but when you're in a party or you're in a group environment or anything like that, you get that kind of feeling, oh, I've got to perform, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. I love shielding those motherfuckers. Hey, you don't want to smoke? Okay, I'll grab you. Let's go smoke a fucking stogie out front. And it doesn't even matter. I'll be the kid that takes your beer if you're not drinking, and you don't want to tell anybody that you didn't drink it. Like I love those kids, because to me. So I think as a child, to be real, I did have a problem with boundaries. I was the kid that would do anything. Ooh. I would push anybody. I felt, man, it comes a lot from the negative sides of me and my father's relationship, I think, where I felt I didn't have any control, and I felt my boundaries were irrelevant, and me as a human being were just at the whims of, my father. And that's a shitty thing. It's a yeah, it's just a shitty thing. So I felt when I was a kid, when I'd see those circumstances and situations, I didn't really understand why I felt so prone to be the protector. But now as an adult, you know, and hashing it out with you, that's totally what it was. You know, like I saw how many times somebody, you know, where you could say no, or don't do this to me, or I don't want to do this, or whatever the fuck it is. And it, you know, you had the opportunity to be the person that made that person feel seen, you know, like that meant more to me than trying to get them to smoke or drink or whatever it was.
Look, I can't deny it's not appealing. You know what I mean? I can't deny that, like, when someone puts like that,
it's got to be. I mean,
that
especially
rope in
with
front of
something
you,
so normal as alcohol, where it's like,
but like even sort of anything, it's like, and I know I'm probably a horrible person. You know, when someone goes, well, this is the boundary, or this is the line, or whatever else, I just kind of want to kick it a little bit to see what happens.
Yes,
but what if I do this? You know.
Well, I actually loved your position earlier. I loved I think I'm gonna. And I do it with some people, but not. It's never been an intentional thing, like you were talking about. I love your. I tend to ask why. I love that. I love that because, again, like you said, it gives. And it's not. I'm not asking you to justify the boundary. It's like you said. I just want to understand it. You know, I just want to understand it. That's it. And it gives me so much depth to you that the boundary's so much more concrete. It goes from being a picket fence to being a wrought iron gate. You know what I mean? And
well, I think it's also, if we're talking specifically about relationships and friendships, right? If you can provide some context around what your boundary is and why you have it, then the person on the other side doesn't feel like they're being rejected or punished. Do you know what I mean? So if all of a sudden you like don't touch me like this or don't do that, I'm like, oh, fuck, you know, normally the first person doesn't know, right? Okay, so here's one. Like it's a stupid innocuous thing, but I fucking hate. I hate when people call me by my surname. I hate when people call me Sellers. I hate it. It's a high school reflex of just, you know, and now no one would know that, right?
Hate it too.
And so, right.
Don't know
and
why.
so occasionally someone I work with, and it's normally a guy, and they're like, "Oh, Sellers," and like I'd flinch the first time, I'm like, he doesn't know. It's okay, you know. But then if it happens again, I'm just like, "Oh, hey, listen, you don't know this. It's not your fault, but like I just don't like people calling by my last name, and it's, of course, it's so random and just so fucking innocuous. They're going to be confused, and I'm just, look, it's a high school thing. It's not really my jam. Call me Chris. Call me anything you want. Just is that cool? And like, oh yeah, that's cool. And that's,
I'm going to be honest with you. For me, that exact scenario, it feels demeaning. I know that sounds so strange because a lot of people tend to find it respectful,
like a bro thing, or like you're
like
included.
A nod. It's a nod, right? Yes,
and,
but
and,
like,
and
bro,
90% of the time probably is.
I feel like you're talking to me like,
you know?
you think you are my fucking teacher, like you think you're my fucking parent, like, or whatever the fuck it is. Like I don't. Oh, it makes me so fucking instantly mad.
Right, and this highlights the fact that like boundaries are sort of going to be random for a lot of people for a lot of different things, and we're not going to know. So if you're in any kind of relationship or a friendship, and then if you need to draw this line with someone, if you can just provide them a little bit of context of how and why, then it's like, if Broedy calls me Sellers and I'm like, don't call me that, it's like, fucking bro's got to punch on.
Yeah, 100%. It's
don't fucking call me that.
Yeah, and I love the way that you put that. It's not that you're sitting there telling me I'm a fucking douche. It's that you're saying, hey, I've had things in the past that have made me feel this way. I don't want to continue to feel that way. That's so much easier for me to digest as well, you know, where it's like, again, you're not saying I'm a douche. You're just saying I don't like it. I don't like it.
Have you ever done it? Like, has anyone done it to you? Like, if you just, I don't know, either approached someone or ever had a circumstance where, or even like Tiff has gone, hey, can you not? And you're like, the fuck? And then she's like, well, here's that's a sigh of absolutely. Love it. It's up to you whether you want to share. You don't have to out Tiff in front of everyone.
No, it's not even. It's not. They're not even bad. I mean, for Tiff and the boys, like so. I'm an aggressive lover. I pinch. I bite. I wrestle. I do all that.
Yes.
So I'm very fucking ornery too, and high energy. So like, I know that fucking breaches so many boundaries for so many people, and there are definitely times when between Tiff and the boys, they're all like, "Bro, fucking stop,
tone down."
And there's just something in me that I hear stop, and I'm like, okay, you want it some more, I guess.
It's not funny. You should respect boundaries, Broedy.
I know, and it really does go to the point where it's like I can tell they're actually starting to be affected and upset, and it's like, okay, now it's time to rein it in. But it's like, bro, you should 5 steps ago. I probably called a timeout and gave him the kiss on the forehead and walked away. But yeah, no, I know that's a problem I have. It's funny that you said that, because again, and I don't feel. Look, I'll say this: I don't feel entirely guilty, because I know there's if it was a definitive boundary that I could tell there was actual animosity towards, and it wasn't irritation, it wasn't just irritation, I wouldn't cross it. I really wouldn't. Like, for instance, Elijah does not like his neck being tickled. I won't do that to him. I'm not going to, no matter how ornery I feel, I'm not just going to go fucking do something that literally physically makes him feel uncomfortable. Tickle him in his ribs or under his armpits, absolutely, probably till he pisses his pants. But like, at least it's not something that he's told me, hey, I really don't like this, please don't do it, and then I continue to fucking that's gross, that's weird.
It's not cool.
No, but I'm ornery.
It's honest. I had a quick shout out to my girlfriend Charms, who's one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world. But she actually called me out
Charms.
once.
We love Charms.
We do. We love Charms. She called me out once because I've got a few female friends, and I'm normally just innocuously flirty with all of them. Married, partnered, single, like whatever. Mm-hmm. And we were texting one day, and I've done this before, but again with other friends, where it's like, oh, so blah blah blah, like, what are you wearing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, with a handful of other girlfriends, they'd either make something up or whatever. And this one day, Charms is like, hey, I get where you're coming from, but I'm not really comfortable with this sort of question. And then just sort of laid it out, where like there might have been a time where I'd like, yes, I'm super flirty and I do all this sort of thing, but I'm not so cool with it because I'm married and and just very clearly set that expectation. And of course, I was fucking mortified.
That's only because you love Charms, not because
it is. But again, it's a circumstance where I didn't know, where it's fine with other people, and then it wasn't. Okay, so, and she was perfectly reasonable about it and perfectly just calm and chilled and handle it. And I felt horrible. And I gave her some space for a couple. I mean, like, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm really sorry. She's like, hey, no, it's no big deal. And that was that. And I gave her a space for a few days because I thought she hated me. And then, of course, she messaged me a few days later and it was cool. And the next time we had dinner, I basically fell on my sword and I'm like, I'm really sorry. And she's like, about what? I'm like, no, about...
Forgot about it. Right.
This, and kind of gave context. And she's like, no, it's totally fine. And we've had the best friendship ever since, But I could have easily tucked my tail between my legs and then just run away and hid and never talked to her again. I could have gone, no, fuck you, slut. Like, everyone else is fine with it. Why aren't you? But that's look, okay, brings us nicely to the end of the episode. That's not what good friends do, right? Good friends aren't going to be perfect to each other all the time, but if we're talking about boundaries and we're going to get to the point about talking about respecting boundaries, then we should at least have the humility to learn if we've hit a sore spot, and respect that, and then you get to make a choice about what you want to do. You know what I mean? Charms could have just decided I wasn't worth it, and that was that. But she was more gracious than that. And I figured, like, hopefully this one misstep doesn't make me a horrible misogynistic son of a bitch. And turns out it didn't, I think. Charms, tell me if I'm wrong.
She's gonna immediately text you after this episode airs and tells you that, hey,
well, it's cool because her mum loves me. So if it doesn't work out with Charms, her mum thinks I'm handsome and charming. So,
but did you get mom's number yet? Because
not yet. I'm respecting.
You still need Charms.
I do. But that's that. Yeah, we had breakfast and I met her mum and she's so lovely. She's so. Well, the morning they went to get tattoos together. They're coolest fucking girls in the world. But that's another story. So there we go, Misfits. Boundaries. We talked about everything. We solved nothing. Standard. It's standard. But at least I think we've touched on Google won't have sex with you without a condom. Yep. He's made that perfectly clear. Assumed my gender, which I'm not so happy about. But it is worthwhile. Google. It is. It's worthwhile establishing clear boundaries with people around you and having them be consistent and enforcing them. And if you find that people aren't respecting them, you've got some information there about what you want to do with that person. Be any final thoughts on episode 66?
Yeah, you're in control. You're in control, folks. I know that's a scary thought, but you're the one that has all the tools within you to set those boundaries, to be aware of them, to enforce and respect others. I mean, it's all within you. So, take a little inventory, take a little responsibility.
Excellent summary. Do you know what's coming up next?
I even have the tab open and I haven't clicked it. Just
so everyone
I don't fucking know. Yeah, they can take a drink.
Everyone can take a drink. Episode 67, Misfits, coming up next week. We're talking about the success iceberg. I think I have an idea of what I meant when I titled this, but I think it's along the lines of like the analogy of the success iceberg is that we always see the successful person. We always see the tip of the iceberg. We always see them at the top of the mountain and fucking amazing. But you don't see everything underneath it, like either the years of work or the not so great behavior. And we're probably going to get deep into this discussion of like, well, what is success and how do you kind of get there and what does your iceberg look like? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Broedy, any initial impressions? Does that make sense? Or am I just talking shit for an episode?
No, I like it. I think it lends the ear to the subject that we touched. I think maybe season 2, where we talked about the highlight reel, right? Like, and
yeah.
It's the same fucking thing. I mean, so many, like you said, so many people get this snapshot, this tiny little snapshot, and make this assumption that that person just had
they've got it
what
made.
It took, or they had it made, or the right opportunity landed in their lap. And it's like, bro, that shit's so aggravating. It's so aggravating because again, you don't see everything underneath. And I'm with it. I like it. I think it'll be a great episode. I think it'll be a great episode.
You can tell us, Misfits, and tell us how you are with boundaries. Tell us how you are with boundaries, whether you're good at setting them, you respect other people's, all that sort of stuff. In the meantime, you can find us here on YouTube and on Spotify. You can find all our details on promisfitspodcast.com. If you've made it this far into the episode, would you consider liking us and would you consider subscribing, because we like you and we like having a chat and we like hanging out.
Yes, I've seen a couple of the everyday misfits come back over the last couple videos where we're a couple episodes into this season. The comments are picking back up. Appreciate you guys. Love you. Seriously, I think some of you are making it to the ends of the episodes because a bulk of these comments that I'm talking about are deep within the material. So
and especially the crew that jumped on, I think it's episode 63, because that got restricted for 18 plus. Go figure.
It got
Like,
flagged. It got restricted for 18 plus. Its views got pushed. So anybody that showed up and gave that a listen, yes, thank you guys. Mwah.
And
I appreciate you.
And I'm a little bit salty because it is one of our, I think, best and richest conversations, but
I do too.
you can't talk about set things on YouTube. Anyway, go figure. Anyway, you know where to find us, and thanks for following. Thanks for subscribing. It's been a real pleasure having you along with us. In the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. Respect your boundaries, and we'll see you on the next one.